Hello, my dear students. Welcome to the first module of the first lesson in your textbook Hornbill. The name of the chapter is Portrait of a Lady, and this is written by the Indian writer Khushwant Singh. Now, in this module, you're going to get an overview of these paragraphs and you will know more about the author. This is the author of this story, Khushwant Singh. Let's learn something about the author. Khushwant Singh, born Khushal Singh on 2nd February 1915, and he passed away on 20th March 2014. He was an Indian novelist, lawyer, journalist and politician. Born and raised in Hadali, Punjab, now in Pakistan, he studied law at St. Stephen's College, Delhi and King's College, London. After working as a lawyer in Lahore court for 8 years, he joined the Indian Foreign Service upon the independence of India from British Empire in 1947. He was appointed journalist in the All India Radio in 1951 and then moved to Department of Mass Communications of UNESCO at Paris in 1956. Khushwant Singh was decorated with the Padma Bhushan in 1974, but he returned the award in 1984 in protest against Operation Blue Star, in which the Indian Army raided Amritsar. In 2007, he was awarded the Padma Vibhushan, the second highest civilian award in India. So that's about the author. You can collect more information from the internet about Khushwant Singh. Now this is an overview of these paragraphs of today's module. This is a poignant portrayal by Khushwant Singh of his grandmother. He fondly describes how she looked after him when she was a little boy, when as a little boy he stayed with her in the village. She would get him ready and then escort him to school. While he studied, she would sit in the temple reading the scriptures. Her selfless love, her words and actions during this period leave an indelible imprint on his mind. So that's an overview of what we are going to learn today. Now let's go into the chapter. Now before going into the chapter, there are a few expressions given. The thought was almost revolting, an expanse of pure white serenity, a turning point, accepted her seclusion with resignation, a veritable bedlam of chirrupings, frivolous rebukes, the sagging skins of dilapidated drum. So you just, as we go reading, try to infer the meanings from the context of from the context. Like when you read the paragraphs, maybe you will be able to predict the meanings. So let's go on with the reading. My grandmother, like everybody's grandmother, was an old woman. She had been old and wrinkled for the 20 years that I had known her. People said that she had once been young and pretty and had even had a husband, but that was hard to believe. My grandfather's portrait hung above the mantelpiece in the drawing room. He wore a big turban and loose-fitting clothes. His long white beard covered the best part of his chest, and he looked at least 100 years old. He did not look the sort of a person who would have a wife or children. He looked as if he could only have lots and lots of grandchildren. As for my grandmother being young and pretty, the thought was almost revolting. She often told us of the games she used to play as a child. That seemed quite absurd and undignified on her part, and we treated it like the fables of the prophets she used to tell us. She had always been short and fat and slightly bent. Her face was a crisscross of wrinkles running from everywhere to everywhere. So, in this paragraph, Khushwant Singh, or maybe the speaker, is describing about his grandmother. He's telling that for the past many years, his grandmother looked same. She did not have any change. She was looking so old that she could not get more older. Like aging could not be more defined on her physical appearance because she was that old. And for the past 20 years, she was the same. She did not change at all. And he have heard other people telling that during her young times she was very pretty and beautiful, and she had a husband. He is finding it very much like ridiculous when thinking of her grandmother with a husband. For him, the figure that he see now, that is his grandmother. He cannot imagine her in any other way. So that's why he's so obsessed about his grandmother. He did not want to imagine that she had a husband or she was pretty. She is beautiful, but he can't imagine that she was pretty and she was young. He wanted her to be the same every time. He was so obsessed with the figure she had now. And people used to say that the grandfather that is seen in the picture on his drawing room, that was her husband. But he felt it more difficult to imagine that this person was her husband, because that grandfather's picture also, he felt like he will not have a wife or children. He was so serious that he will have only grandchildren. He won't have a wife or a children. That is our speaker's imagination. That's it. And thinking of his grandmother, young and pretty, was almost revolting. Just guess the meanings of those who that expression yourself. And his grandmother used to tell them stories about her young age, but he did not want to imagine that also, that grandmother played during that time. He felt absurd. He felt like she used to tell the stories of prophets and maybe any other religious stories. So he felt like it was same kind of imaginary stories, not imaginary, maybe the prophet stories were true, but we feel like it is a kind of imaginary stories. Similarly, he felt that the grandmother's stories of playing was like imaginary, something like imaginary. It was just like a fable to him. And for him, she was always short, fat, and slightly bent because of the age she had bent. So for him, she was always short, fat, and bent. Her face was full of wrinkles. Crisscross of wrinkles means full of wrinkles on the face from everywhere to everywhere. She had wrinkles on her face from everywhere to everywhere. No, we were certain she had always been as we had. So our speaker is telling that no, she can't be anything else other than what I know her, what I see her now. She will be the same. I can't imagine her in any other way. Old, so terribly old that she could not have grown older and had stayed at the same age for 20 years. She could never have been pretty, but was always beautiful. She hobbled about the house in spotless white with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop and the other telling the beads of her rosary. Her silver locks were scattered untidily over her pale, puckered face, and her lips constantly moved in inaudible prayer. Yes, she was beautiful. She was like the winter landscape in the mountains, an expanse of pure white serenity, breathing peace and contentment. So, our speaker has described his grandmother that she was so terribly old that she can't grow any more older, and uh, she had stayed for the past 20 years. She was the same. She was beautiful, but he can't imagine her as pretty and young. And always she walked around in the house with spotless white dress. She always used to wear pure clean white dress, and on her one hand always rested on her waist to balance her stoop. She was a bit bent forward because of her age. So she used to keep one hand on her waist to balance her stoop, and other on the in the other hand she always had the beads of rosary. Beads means a chain with beads or pearls to chant the religious prayers. We used to have it in the hands to take account of the prayer we do. That is beads of rosary means. And her silver locks. Silver locks. What do you mean by locks? Locks means hair. Silver locks means gray hair. It's scattered untidily over her pale, puckered. Puckered means very tight face because of the age. Her face was wrinkled and tight, and always her lips moved with a prayer, silent prayer. Prayer which was not silent, which was inaudible. It would not be heard outside, but her lips would always be moving out the because of the prayer. She says, she chants. Yes, she was beautiful. She was like winter landscape. He's describing her. She was like winter landscape. She was a symbol of peace and love. She looked divine. My grandmother and I were good friends. My parents left me with her when they went to live in the city, and we were constantly together. She used to wake me up in the morning and get me ready for the school. She said her morning prayer in a monotonous sing-song while she bathed and dressed me in the hope that I would listen and get to know it by heart. I listened because I loved her voice, but never bothered to learn it. Then she would fetch my wooden slate, which she had already washed and plastered with yellow chalk, a tiny earthen ink pot, and a red pen, tie them all in a bundle and hand it to me. After a breakfast of a thick stale chapati with a little butter and sugar spread on it, we went to school. She carried several stale chapatis with her for the village dogs. So, um, our speaker's parents went to the city. They were they want they start went to live in the city. Then the grandmother and the speaker was left alone in the village. So she used to wake him up in the morning. She used to make him get ready for the school, and she would prepare all the things for him to school. What all were the things? The wooden slate, which was very washed and which was cleanly washed and plastered with yellow chalk, and there was a tiny earthen ink pot, the pot of ink uh, to fill the ink to fill in the pen, and a red pen, and she would tie all them in a bundle because those days students or children did not have bags, so she would tie it in a bundle and give it to him. And for breakfast, he had stale chapati. The chapati was not that fresh. Maybe it was prepared the day before or something, and there was butter and sugar spread on it. And she used to carry many stale chapatis to give to the village dogs on their way to school. Now, these are the new words that we came across today. First one is crisscross, which means a pattern of intersecting straight lines or paths. Hobbled means walk in an awkward way. Stoop, have the head and shoulders habitually bent forward. Pucker, tightly gather or contract into wrinkles or small folds. Stale, no longer fresh and pleasant to eat, hard, musty, or dry. Now, these are the self-check questions. Try answering these questions. If you're not able to, read the text again. Now, you have your TMLA here. You have to describe the speaker's grandmother. Write a paragraph describing the speaker's grandmother and upload it in the classroom. That's all. Thank you for listening. Take care. Bye bye.